Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Downloaded Content Podcast. If you're new here, please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And the best thing to do is go ahead and subscribe to the Downloaded Content newsletter if you haven't done that to get things that are exclusive straight to your inbox. I do apologize. Last week we did not have a podcast because there was a death in the DLC family. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Wade family. But hopefully Dylan and I will be back next week where we're going to be talking about the profound movie, The Life of Chuck. Normally I do say narrator, fictional character, and author, but today I think I'm Minister Crumpton. And spent the weekend off of social media doing a lot of praying and meditating to kind of compile some things that I really want to get off my chest. And before I really start, I want to read a passage from a Buddhist scripture called the Dhammapada. And it's from the section entitled The Wise. It goes like this. If someone sees an intelligent person who is skillfully able to point out shortcomings and give suitable reproof, let him cherish such a revealer of hidden treasures. Only good can come from such an association. Let the wise one guide, correct, and deter others from what is base and vile. He will be treasured by the good and spurned by the evil. So, I had quite a few calls in the past few weeks, but one in particular that I really want to discuss. Out of the blue, someone who I know, have known for a few years, but I haven't spoken to for about two. We text back and forth. They gave me a call. This is a veteran who I respect very much. And immediately when I saw, their name on the caller ID, I knew that something was up. And so I answered the phone and could tell that they were distraught. They were, like so many of us in this country with eyes to see, very heavy. I think that's the appropriate word. And what they had to say to me or inquire of me was, one, to see if they were an island, if they were alone in their observations about the things that are going on in this country. And what they relayed to me, again, this is a veteran who still works within military channels or government channels. So what they were distraught about was the fact that people around them that for years he had called brother or sister in a common mission of defending and upholding the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. He had been witnessing them en masse, agreeing with, facilitating, participating, and generally thinking that it was a good idea to do some of the things that we're seeing in the news, such as, the harassment of the Hispanic community, deportations, concentration camps, things of that nature. It was really weighing heavy on him that his brothers and sisters in arms or people who he worked with within government were advocating for a lot of the things that so much of us are concerned with in this country right now. And he felt like he was losing his mind. Like, is he the only one who can see in his peer group that what we're seeing come down from the commander-in-chief of this great free country, that these things are not only a violation of the supreme law of the land, but they're evil. And I sat with him for a good long while in that heaviness, in that uncomfortable space when you are surrounded by people who are adamant about doing the wrong thing, convinced that they're doing the right thing. Because it's very crazy making, when you're in the right and everyone around you is clearly in the wrong. And so he reached out to me, and it made me feel good to a degree, because he said that though admittedly he had sworn an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, he had admittedly not read it as much as, say, someone like myself. And that if there was anybody who he knew who'd ever handed him a pocket constitution that truly was what he would consider a patriot, it was me. So I was honored that, after such a long period of not actually speaking to this person, that when they're seeing all this treasonous activity around them happen, that they thought of me. Call and see what Daniel thinks. That was very moving. And in this conversation, I let him know, no, you're not crazy. It is something that is quite bewildering. And even the phrase that he used was, it seems like everyone is under a spell. And I agree. I think that as a minister and as someone who has quite the affinity for the King James Bible and the prophecies therein, that is exactly what is going on in our nation, that people are under a spell. They're under a hypnotic trance. And as the Bible does say, during the end times, that if it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived. There would be delusion put over the eyes of the majority, to where, they couldn't see the handwriting on the wall if their nose was against the wall. And I relayed to him that I understood that I wake up every day in this country and am brokenhearted at what I see going on around me. And the justifications for the wrongdoing that are being put out there, that are just so shallow. In my conversation with him, I relayed to him, I said, listen, I don't know what your spiritual background is, but it really doesn't matter, because every spiritual faith talks about a time period where everything's going to collapse, everything's going to come down, the end days, the end times, whatever you want to call it. I have my particular interpretations of prophecies, and you can have yours, and that's fine. But most people agree that there is a period where it all comes crashing down. And I said, it's my belief that that's where we're at, that we're in those days. We're in the last of the last days, where all of the things that you hear about or read about in the book of the Revelation are coming to fruition. And now it doesn't seem so far-fetched that these things can happen and can transpire. And so I said, it's not everybody can see it, and not everybody would agree with me on that, but I'm convinced that we are. And since we are, we each individually have to decide who we are during these times. We have to decide if we are going to be spectators of this great evil and watch, keep going to work, clocking in, doing, the normal everyday things while the world burns and our neighbors and our friends are being black bagged and put in the back of vans and taken to Alligator Alcatraz or God knows where. We're either just going to go along to get along while these things are happening to everybody around us, and then eventually us ourselves, or we have to decide if we're going to participate in all of this great evil. Or we have to make the decision if we're going to speak out about it, do something about it. But each one of us has to decide who we are during these times. And that's, I gave him a few references to go and look up scripturally to see where we're at on the timeline. And told him, unequivocally, as I have said to anybody who would listen to me, that my belief is that the creature that a good majority of Americans put into the highest place of power, if he is not the Antichrist, he is certainly an Antichrist. Um, he's certainly gonna, if he were auditioning for the part of the beast or the little horn, he's given it his all. Let me just put it to you that way. And I know that I'm not alone. There are a lot of people in my community and in spiritual circles who share the belief that he may very well be that wicked one that we have all been warned about, that was coming onto the scene. And by the looks of it, like I said, I'm almost absolutely 100% convinced that it's him at the top of the American food chain, at the top of the hierarchy, if you were. And that can be scary. And it makes sense to me why everything that we see happening from his seat of power is to denigrate, degrade, whittle away, diminish the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Now, people who've ever heard anything that I've ever said, maybe I haven't explained it properly. Maybe I haven't articulated properly why it is that I reverence the Bill of Rights and the Constitution as much as I do. This is why. Some people consider the Bill of Rights to be a political document. Some people believe that it's a contract. Maybe that's correct. You're free to interpret it any way you want to. The way that I look at it is as a devoutly spiritual person who in my life does everything that he can to emulate the life of who we know as of Christ. I look at it as a very condensed logos. When I think of the Bill of Rights, I think about our founding fathers who were not dummies. They most certainly had looked at tyrannical governments prior to them and studied to show themselves approved, workmen that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And they said, let's look at this one individual, whether you believe he's historical or not, who, according to the story, was sinless, which means innocent, right? He didn't do anything wrong. So when I look at the Bill of Rights, I see, an endeavor to protect the rights of the individual. I see a reversal of what went wrong with the trial of Christ. For example, Christ was subject to a kangaroo court, and he was not judged by his peers. He remained silent. He was taken without warrant, without cause. There was no probable cause to search and seize Christ. And so when I look at the Bill of Rights, that's what I see. I see an attempt to answer the execution of an innocent man. Almost like whenever in the scriptures, Christ was asked, what's the greatest of the commandments? And he took all the law and the prophets and he boiled it down to two commandments. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. He condensed it. Well, in my opinion, I think that what the Bill of Rights is an attempted condensation of the trial of Christ. So from my spiritual point of view, taking an oath to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is a very, very serious thing. It's more serious than I think people realize who do it, which is sad because, every elected official raises their hand and they swear an oath to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and most of them don't even read it, and that's a sad, sad thing. For example, there is another veteran that I know who recently I spoke with, and they had fought in Vietnam, and they started carrying around a pocket constitution as a result of me handing them one. And I was very happy to hear that they had started to read the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and memorize it. And they swore an oath, back in the days of Vietnam, and went and fought a war for the document. But they were just now getting around to reading it. So, which I think that's the case with a lot of elected officials or anybody who swears the oath. I think that they have an idea what the philosophy of it is: freedom, liberty for everybody. And yes, that's true. But I don't think that most people who swear an oath to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, reverence it in the way that I reverence it, as if it were a condensation of the trial of Christ. Especially, a lot of people who are evangelical Christians within government or within, any office where that oath was taken. I don't think they look at it that way either. I think they think it's maybe a complicated document that only lawyers can understand. And, so they'll just raise their hand and willy-nilly swear an oath to it and whatever, which is very, very sad. And I think a lot of elected officials, if they were honest and you asked them, hey, when's the last time you actually cracked it open and read it? It would be an embarrassing answer, I'm sure. So, it was good to hear from my veteran friend in that capacity, that he was becoming disheartened, that there's no doubt about it how many people are just violating the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and their oath. It's just very, very obvious now. And you see it everywhere. You see the entire structure of our dead republic's law has been diminished to, whatever modern day scribes and Pharisees say, which is that's your lawyers and your judges, in case you didn't know. And as a result of it being diminished incrementally and now chunk by chunk, we're in the state of affairs that we're in. And after that conversation, I sat in the heaviness for a few days, but every day that I would wake up after this conversation, there's a name that would pop up in my mind when I would rise. And that name is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer is, class? He was an awesome guy. Look him up. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in short. He was a minister during the time of World War II, during the rise of the Führer. Very spiritual guy. And actually, he was like their version of a podcaster. So he would, preach on the radio and things like that. And one of the things that he preached against was the maniacal idea of an Aryan race, this eugenics-driven philosophy that gave rise to the Third Reich and allowed Adolf Hitler to form the Nazi Party and completely take that country and those people and others into the Second World War. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer was very adamantly opposed to this philosophy. And he, before the war broke out, he fled to America because he saw the writing on the wall. And from memory, I think he lasted about 26 days in America, and he wrote back to a relative, and he was so convicted in his heart at what he saw happening that he said, I've made the wrong decision. I would have no right to rebuild a Christian Germany if I did not endure what's going on with my people. And so he got on a ship, and I think it was like the last ship that left before the war officially broke out. And he went back home to Germany to be with his people and to do good where he could during the reign of a madman. And so, a lot of historians say that the miracle with Dietrich Bonhoeffer was that he lived as long as he did, because he was just a very outspoken guy, very critical, of, the Nazi Party from the very beginning. And that was a death sentence in a lot of cases. He when he did get back to Germany, he refused compulsory service. He was like, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to go, fight in your insane war and kill innocent people," which branded him basically a traitor. So that was a death sentence in and of itself. But miraculously enough, I think he had a brother who was in military intelligence and got him a job, away from all of that. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer, throughout the course of World War II, put into practice, not just with words, but with his actions, what he felt Christ would do if Christ were in that situation. And what did that look like? Well, it looked like, helping Jewish people avoid concentration camps. It looked like, smuggling people out of the country. It looked like joining resistance cells of people who were not going to go along with the dictates of a madman and the hierarchy beneath him, going all the way down, from the SS to the Gestapo. So this man of God, this minister, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, violated the law in a lot of different ways in order to put his faith into practice. And so a lot of you may have heard of, Operation Valkyrie. There was a movie, you can rent it on whatever, with Tom Cruise is in the movie, but he was connected to Operation Valkyrie, which was it was a plot of Germans, by Germans, to assassinate Der Führer with a suitcase bomb. He was actually connected to that. So, of course, Operation Valkyrie did not go off as planned. Hitler got, a busted eardrum and singed pants when the briefcase was slightly moved away from where it was supposed to be. Well, the Führer was so infuriated after Valkyrie that, he used the Gestapo and their national database to hunt down anybody that they could connect to this assassination plot. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer happened to be one of them. He wasn't a mastermind or anything like that, but he was connected to it. And so Dietrich Bonhoeffer was ultimately arrested. It spent the rest of his life in World War II, in Nazi cages. And there's tons of stuff online that you can look up about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. His writings were absolutely brilliant. If you want to ever be inspired by literature during times of treason and tyranny, where it seems like my friend who called me, everyone around you is participating in the wickedness, I would suggest you look up, the writings of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. But what I wanted to really hover over, because I think that myself and a lot of people who are listening to me and my friend who called me, the veteran friend, I think that what we're all kind of trying to process is what Dietrich Bonhoeffer was really trying to process and wrote extensively about, which is, how is it that you can get a nation of writers, of poets, of artists, of mathematicians, of good people? How do you get an entire nation who had so much potential to follow the hierarchy of a madman and do ungodly things, unthinkable things to other human beings? It really tore at his mind, as it tears at mine. How does that happen? So he had a lot of time to think about this and write about this in Cages. And do you want to know what he came up with? It wasn't evil. It wasn't the devil. It wasn't malice. When he came to his conclusion on how you actually get a nation of people to go along with a madman and do criminal things, ungodly things, he came up with stupidity. Mass stupidity. Now, this is not to say that the Nazis were uneducated or not intellectual. That's not what he meant, because you can be highly intellectual, highly educated, but get caught up in the collective stupidity that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was talking about, right? And let me read a quote from Bonhoeffer that I found. Now, this was letters and papers from prison. Quote, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil. It can be exposed, and if need be, prevented by use of force. Evil always carries within itself the germ of its own subversion, in that it leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. Against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protest nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Facts that contradict one's prejudgment simply need not be believed. In such moments, the stupid person even becomes critical, and when facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental. In all this, the stupid person, in contrast to the malicious one, is utterly self-satisfied, and being easily irritated becomes dangerous by going on the attack. For that reason, greater caution is called for when dealing with a stupid person than with a malicious one. Never again will we try to persuade the stupid person with reasons, for it is senseless and dangerous." End quote. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Letters and Papers from Prison. Check it out. So, he was of the opinion that, stupidity is worse than evil, because evil people typically know that they're doing evil. Stupid people count what they're doing as virtue and integrity. And I totally feel it. Like, I totally feel what Dietrich Bonhoeffer was talking about right there. Because when you try to point out some of the issues that are going on today in the collective of America, it's very frustrating. It's like beating your head against a wall. People think that the evil that they're participating in, incrementally or even just by a hair, that they're doing something virtuous, or it's or with integrity, when it couldn't be further from the truth, right? Mass stupidity. As a result of World War II, there was a study called the Milgram experiment, which I've spoken about before on a podcast. But the Milgram experiment, look it up, was John Milgram, I think his name was. He wanted to also understand how you can get a nation or a mass of people to do horrific things like the Holocaust. And so look up the Milgram experiment. What he essentially brought in test subjects and had them shock others through a wall to the point of them screaming through the wall because a guy in a lab coat came in and told them to turn it all the way up. And what John Milgram deduced at the end of his experiment is that people will do the most horrific things to other human beings if they are ordered or told to do it by an authority figure, a guy in a lab coat, or a boss, that they are willing to electrocute other human beings to the point of death because they were told to do it by who they perceived to be an authority figure. Look it up. Look up the Milgram experiment. And this is what we're actually seeing in America right now. We're seeing a repeat of history And we're seeing people all down the hierarchy from our modern day Führer all the way down. We're seeing people follow orders because they were told to by their boss. It's very scary. And it's also very heartbreaking to see and to watch people who, you believe to be intellectual or educated following orders to do horrific things, you know. But human nature is human nature, I suppose. The other thing is, I think it was called the Ash experiment, where, in times like this, the Ash experiment was, and I'm just very, very rough, I'm giving you a rough draft of it, where the study had, five actors come in and then one test study, and they would have two lines drawn on a chalkboard, right? And I might have it backwards a little bit, but you'll get the gist of it. And so both lines were identical in length, or I might have that backwards. One line was clearly longer than the other, and all the actors would act like the lines were the same. And of course, the one person who they were actually studying, who wasn't in on the study, would go against their own observations, their own senses, because the majority were saying one thing, and then they would agree. And that was the Ash experiment, I believe, where people will, in the collective of a mob, they will forego what their own eyes, their own ears, their own nose, their own heart is telling them is the truth, because, I don't want to be the oddball out. And so it's very interesting how mass stupidity, collective stupidity, can allow what we're seeing and where we're going, because I don't see any indication that we're not going to be repeating this history as far as what happened with World War II. We're already starting to see it with, the targeting of certain demographics with immigration, and that's just the beginning. And all across this country, politicians and people behind a badge and people who have sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution from enemies, both foreign and domestic, they're just throwing it right out the window. It's pretty heartbreaking. Which brings me to one of the next things that I think is facilitating this. And that's not knowing where you're at on the map. Let me explain. When I was a kid, my mom and dad used to love watching Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. You remember Unsolved Mysteries? I just dated myself. That's fine. And so I love my parents. I was always up underneath their ass. And so when Unsolved Mysteries was on, I was on. And there was one episode, I vaguely remember it, but it was talking about the Bermuda Triangle, right? And why, so many pilots would go missing in the Bermuda Triangle. And essentially it was, there's something funky going on out there that messes with your compass. And so these pilots, they didn't know where they actually were. They, with the compass spinning around and everything, they assumed through the fog that if they turned, they were actually like in the Gulf, and if they kept going east, they would hit the Florida airstrip and see land, and they could land. But because their compass was off and they didn't know where they were on the globe, they were actually going farther and farther out into the Atlantic until their fuel ran out, and then kerplunk, they went missing. So I think that that's another thing that is causing this mass repetition of history. Is most people caught up in collective stupidity, they really don't know where they're at on the map. And to kind of bring it home a little bit, let me illustrate what I'm talking about for you with this political chart that Archer the Space Noodle had done up for me. So this is an accurate political scale, and we know that it's accurate because Archer the Space Noodle put it together. And by the way, if you're not watching me and you're just listening to the podcast on Spotify or whatever, and you want a copy of this, just go to downloadedcontent.com, subscribe to my newsletter, and after you get your welcome email, just hit apply and say, hey, can you send that incredibly cute political scale, which is also accurate, and I'll be happy to do so. But let's take a look at it for a minute, and you'll see that obviously this political scale is not what you were indoctrinated to believe in and imbibe in your government school. Um, However, every person that I have shown this scale to so far, after examining it, they go, "Yeah, it's pretty accurate." I think it's accurate. So on the far left over here, you have the state, and the way I like to think of the state is basically a dead body, a corpse, a corporation, a beast, right? The state. It has no individual soul. It's not really concerned with the rights of the individual or protecting them. It's all about the good of the body of the zombie, right? And of course, for all of my spiritual listeners, you know that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty or freedom, which is over here on the scale on the far right. Okay. So, I think that this is a pretty good representation of accuracy in America. And so, most people identify as either left or right. I'm either far left or I'm far right. This binary, um, polarized paradigm of thinking about, how government works. And to tell you the truth, most people who have gotten our country into the state of affairs are right in here. They're, either on the left with the Democrats or on the right with the Republicans. And you can kind of see in here between the brackets of Democrats, you have communism is the farthest to the state zombie corpse that you can get. And then a little step behind that is fascism. And then, of course, a little bit before that is socialism. And you got liberals in there, within the Democrat bracket. Of course, you got your rhino Republicans. They're just Republican in name only. They're right there, doing the tug of war as close to the pit as they can. And then you have things like the Tea Party. And then there's the center line, right, on the way to freedom. Now, as you can see on this chart, the center line of freedom to the left of it is most everybody that you know. Okay. And they are, lacking the same ability to know where they're at, like those pilots in the Bermuda Triangle, because they think that their left-right paradigm or Democrat-Republican paradigm is the entirety of the scale, when in all actuality, it's a trick. It's a trap, as General Akbar would say. And they're on the left side of the scale in regards to freedom and the opposite of freedom. And that's the tug of war that is happening and has happened all of my life, that most people have, through collective stupidity, bought into. That is the entirety of the paradigm. And of course, we see where it goes. It's any push or exhortation of energy, real energy in any of these areas, is only going to get you to the opposite of freedom and liberty, or as far away from the Spirit of the Lord as you could possibly get, right? To a dead state. And then, of course, on the right side of center, you have conservatives, people who want to conserve the fundamentals of our nation, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Now, look, I know that that's not the definition of conservative in today's nomenclature. That's not how people who call themselves conservative think about themselves, but again, we live in an Orwellian society where, words, the meaning of words are changed all the time, which means mind control. You change the meaning of words and you can change a culture. And then a little past conservative going towards freedom is libertarian. And then, somewhere after that, you have anarcho-capitalism. And then, of course, the closest that you can get to freedom, or the spirit of the Lord is anarchy, right? And that's as close as you can get to freedom. We've never really seen what a true anarchist society would look like on planet Earth. And anarchy isn't what most people think. They think of Molotov cocktails and, burning things down, and that's a psyop. That's propaganda. That's not what anarchy is. But I'm not going to do your research for you. You can look it up yourself. But anarchy is the closest to freedom that you can get. And so, like I said, most people don't know where they're at on the map. And but the funny thing is that they're always carrying the flag of freedom and equality and all of that good stuff, but it's going in the other way. And so a lot of people that I have spoken to here recently about the state of affairs, they agree that the worst thing that this country could have ever done was accept this two-party system bullshit that's been shoved down our throats. But here we are, right? And like Bonhoeffer said, those paradigms are filled with educated and intellectual people, right? And they're absolutely convinced that they're doing something virtuous, and the direction that they've taken us in is, towards equality and all that good stuff. And you can't reason with them, so don't even try. It's it's like Christ said, don't throw your pearls before swine, lest they turn and rent you, and buddy, they will. So anywho, but I know you guys who have been long-time subscribers of mine, you already know this stuff. But for bonus points, Timmy in the back, where do you think yours truly is on this scale? The other thing about this scale I think would be quite useful for those of you who are, adamant about having some kind of freedom is, whenever you're being solicited by political candidates in whatever, you should show them this and just ask them to point out where they fall on this scale. Just point your finger, where are you at? And I'm pretty sure that most all of them are going to be on the left side of center, going towards the zombie beast system, right? I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, the divide and conquer thing has brought us to where we're at, where now, people who have sworn an oath to the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the philosophy of, equality for everyone are participating in, well, some Nazi stuff. I mean, and I want to make a point about that. When we hear about Nazis, we think, the guys in the stormtrooper outfits and with the SS on their collar, but no, Nazis were everyone who participated with the agenda of a maniacal dictator who believed in eugenics and doing horrible things like, compiling national databases and setting up concentration camps and creating secret police and policing the people with the military and all kinds of stuff like that. So it was everybody who participated and facilitated, from librarians who supported it to, your local beat cop to the baker, down the street or whatever. They were all Nazis, right? They weren't, the Nazis weren't just the people who, threw the Jews in the furnaces and everything. It was every member of the functioning society of Nazi Germany was a cog in the machine of the Nazi Party, right? And so, and a lot of them, I guess, they thought they were very well-meaning people, and they would get up every day and, just do their job and put on their uniform or go to their place of facilitating Holocaust, and they would do it and they kind of put blinders on and go, it's for the good of the state. When we're all good, then we're good. And so, yeah, so that's where we're at right now in America, is you have from the top of the hierarchy all the way down to your local areas, you have the facilitation of the dictates of a tyrannical madman who has no qualms whatsoever about putting human beings in concentration camps and laughing about it, naming, you know, torture farms, alligator Alcatraz, and you have the masses, a lot of the masses, just celebrating this, like we live in, the fall of Rome and the gladiators bashing each other's heads in, this bread and circus type of thing that people are actually endorsing and supporting and doing mental gymnastics to justify as righteous. And we have it happening today, little by little, as Radiohead would say. So, like I said, take a look at that and understand that most people don't know where they're at on the map. And I look at it and I go, like my friend who called me, I'm like, well, this is a part of the spell. This is a part of the trance. This is a part of the hypnosis that the masses are under. That this paradigm is the only paradigm, and all the energy has been focused there. All of the intention has been focused there, and they play pretend that because politics is theater. It's all theater, ladies and gentlemen. They play pretend that they're doing something for the good, when in all actuality, the friction is just generating energy towards the state, right? And not towards the Spirit of the Lord, where there is freedom and liberty. And a major part of it is the divide and conquer. The divide and conquer of, we're going to label you this Democrat, leftist, liberal, and we're going to label you this Republican, conservative, MAGA, and then pit them against one another, when in the bigger picture, they're not really paying attention to what's going on. They're just caught up in the collective stupidity. So divide and conquer into different titles or egoic structures or whatever has always been the way you can convince a society to do horrible things, just like in Nazi Germany, right? And, to me, it's kind of obvious. You'd think that it would be obvious to, intellectual, well-educated people, but it's not, okay? The scales are over the eyes of most everyone that you know, coming all the way down to your local level.
This episode of Downloaded Content is brought to you by Georgia's most trusted Reiki healer and tarot guide, Mona Lucia. Whether you're seeking deep energetic balance through Reiki or clarity and insight with a tarot reading, Mona offers both in-person and virtual sessions to meet you where you are. Step into a sacred space of healing and discovery and align with the path meant for you. Book your appointment today at monalucia.com. That's monalucia.com.
Thanks for watching Downloaded Content. Brought to you by CannaSense Total Wellness. In a society medicated by algorithms, plant medicine is your way out. CannaSense delivers medical cannabis to all 50 states. No card needed, no doctor visits. Just healing. It's free to join, and you'll get 25% off your first order when you submit a sponsorship form. Questions? Call 1-833-633-4208. CannaSense, because waking up is the real medicine.
And, for example, the divide and conquer and how you can control the masses, let me just bring it down to something more closer to home. For those of you who have followed me, forever, for a while there, I did something called the Wartown Times, where I, tongue-in-cheek, kind of followed local government. Now, we know that, your local municipalities and things like that, they're not actually government, they're companies, they're incorporated. Like, I reside in Wellston, near the fictional corporation of Warner Robins. And, when I first did, like, the first season of the Wartown Times, I would put those little jokes and jabs in there that it was the fictional city or a corpse or a corporation. And it just, to the people in my jurisdiction, fellow pneumatics, they didn't get it. Right. But that's the case. I mean, you're dealing with subsidiaries of the corporation of the United States, even in your local areas, unless you're in an unincorporated area, you're dealing with a subsidiary of the bigger beast system, a smaller cog, and it's a company. It's not actually government. It's a company. Their city charters are like their business license, right? And there's stipulations and codes and statutes and bylaws and all that good stuff. But your local governments are businesses, all right? Masquerading as government. Again, refer back to that chart and understand that most people don't know where they're at on the map. Like they believe that they're acquiescing or adhering to the dictates of a legitimate government in their local area, but in fact they're going along with bylaws of an incorporated entity, a business, right? And what do businesses do? They're there to make money, right? It's about revenue. It's not about protecting your rights or upholding the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. It's not really what it's about. Okay, it's about revenue generation. I don't have to explain that to any of you guys. So when I did the Wartown Times, I was kind of tongue in cheek, trying to illustrate this, and that even on your local level, what you're dealing with is political theater. That it's a show, right? It's a packaged, scripted, characters cast Netflix show. I mean, there to sell you and to create the illusion that you're actually interfacing and interacting with government when you're not really doing that, right? So I did that for a while, and obviously, if you guys have been getting my newsletters, you know that I've completely quit activism or acting like government itself can do anything other than injure the rights of the people. Okay, so I'm done acting as if you can actually make change in government, because that's delusional. You can't. It is, the corporations are, again, a part of a beast system of people who are under a spell. Now, do the people who are operating within these corporations necessarily know that? I mean, maybe some, but not to the degree that you and I know what's going on. They think that they're actually doing government when they're actually just doing commerce. So, and it goes, again, it's that way in the entire hierarchy of the United States of America under Trump, right? And that is what that is. But they put on a good show. And of course, since I walked away from it, I feel a lot better. I've gotten more actual rest and more peaceful days of, kind of doing what I want to do and living a fulfilled life. And it's not always easy, but regardless. So in the local area, this same divide and conquer kind of thing is going on. Obviously, we all have elections going on right now. And, where I've been assigned down here in the South jurisdiction, my fellow pneumatics. Now, let me preface. I believe, as the scriptures teach, that all of this illusion is a spiritual matter, and that we are dealing with powers and principalities and forces that are in the unseen. I've been studying spiritual warfare since I was a kid, and my interpretations of the scriptures, which are kind of clear, is that when you're dealing with politicians or anything like that, kings, queens, all that good stuff, you have forces in the unseen, like the angel and the demon, that are behind the scenes manipulating and influencing each politician. And then you have, powers and authorities over regions of areas, right? This is a biblical teaching. This is not far-fetched. I don't think that people around my jurisdiction get it quite as much as they should, but they should. There are forces behind anyone put in places of power, where they got some stuff whispered in their ear one way, or trying to encourage them towards, I don't know, the right side of that scale we were talking about, towards freedom and liberty. But nevertheless, I digress. In this realm, it's all political theater, right? It's a show. And in this jurisdiction where I'm at, one of the tricks that the entity around here has played over these people for a long, long time is the divide and conquer tactic of racism, right? It's very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Fermented around in the South. And, when I say systemic racism around here, I know that it bounces off a lot of people, or they don't quite drill into what I'm talking about as deep as they probably should. I'm talking about systemic racism in that the system itself is operating in a manner that is detrimental to people based off of certain demographics. Okay, the system. That does not mean that every individual operating within that system would identify as a racist. Like, a lot of them probably wouldn't. Most of them probably would not identify as a racist that are facilitating, enabling, encouraging, and empowering a systemically racist system. They're just doing their job, right? They're just a guard down at your local private prison. They're just, they're just a law enforcement officer that's, doing their job because the laws that are on the books, the codes, the statutes, and the acts are the law, and I'm just doing my job, right? And that's what most people think. But the systemic racism, I mean, I've been observing, the people around here for maybe 3 decades, and it's very cogent. And how it manifests is, you have, unfortunately, a group of people with a mindset that goes back a long way of, I don't know, people farming, or, I call it modern day slavery, but people farming. And how that works down in the South is that, melanated people down here, minorities, they undergo an enormous amount of oppression from the system. It's almost like they don't have a leg up at all. Even when they come into the world, the deck is already stacked against them so much that it's not going to be long before a melanated young man ends up in custody, in a cage, and on paper for the rest of their life, and typically for a victimless crime. And the system just feeds off of them, right? And it's pretty bad, and it's pretty bad down here. And that goes back to, days when Caucasians were way more open about what they were doing. You know what I'm saying? But they're still doing it. They're just doing it with some wordplay and some statutes, codes, and acts and ordinances. But it's still going on, the people farming. And but when that had to kind of change, verbiage had to change. And so, it's kind of like that Poltergeist movie. When it comes to this stuff, they move the tombstones, but they don't move the bodies, so that's why you got the haunting going on. And so the people, the natives around here, their perspectives change, and a lot of them wouldn't think that they were racist because of, well, put it to you this way. A lot of Caucasians in this area don't think they're racist because they have melanated people assimilated into their systems and their structures. Okay. Like if I go talk to Southern Baptist Church, an incorporated Southern Baptist church around here, most of the people there would believe, because they have, some melanated people that they've assimilated into their culture and into their church and into their way of life, that they're not racist because, hey, we got some melanated people here. The same thing goes for within, your local government. Hey, we have, assimilated melanated people into our fabrication that all of this is actually the supreme law and actual government. And so we're clearly not racist, right? And they don't understand that if they are facilitating a system that is oppressing, melanated people, and generating revenue off of their life, your hands might not be so clean. But that's kind of how it works around here. That's how the spirit behind this jurisdiction kind of manipulates people, is by getting them to think that, well, if we're assimilated into one another's systems and structures and churches and things like that, that we're not all partaking of a systemically oppressive and racist system when they are. So, one of the other ways that I think this is done is, if you guys know, I don't use terms like black or white. They're dumb, they're disempowering, they're dishonest. Black and white, again, is that binary, polarized invitation to identify with a construct that was not given. I mean, that you didn't come to on your own. It was given to you, and it's not an accurate reflection of reality. All right. To illustrate, if you were to ask me to hold up my hand and ask me if I was a white guy, okay, and I said yes, then you would be looking at somebody who was brainwashed, because I am not white. If you were to ask a melanated man to hold up his arm and ask him, are you black? And if he said yes, then you would be looking at someone under mind control, because he is not black. So I hear black and white, and I think of a chessboard, and that means that somebody is moving the pieces around on a board in a binary simulated battle for royal people, black and white, black versus white, divide and conquer. Which is why, the energetic charging of terms like white power or black excellence, it's like, what? Like, these are untruths, right? Everybody is a shade of brown, at best. Maybe I should have Archer do a culture scale. But people are not black and people are not white, but people are adamant about using these terms, and that's the reality and that's the paradigm. Just like that political scale with Democrats and Republicans, they feed the energy of a false paradigm, and then wonder why things don't change. Well, you can only think in the words you use, man, I guess. So there's that. Now, that's how it kind of, the powers that be and the unseen really keep things under control down here. And, that's sad. It's sad to see. It's sad to be around and watch it play out. But, here in my jurisdiction and near the fictional city of Warner Robins, we have, elections going on, of course. And thank God I've retired from political activism, because it's, oh my God. But I am paying attention to what's going on around here. And what I'm seeing is that we have a campaign between the incumbent, LaRhonda Patrick, and a newcomer by the name of Fabian Velazquez. And so I'm paying attention to it, but not with any investment or with any investment that government's going to change one way or the other. You know what I'm saying? Let's just put it to you this way. If you've ever heard me tell you to go vote, or that I went to go vote, or you've seen a picture of me with I voted Peach or whatever, believe me, it was a tongue-in-cheek inside joke. Okay? I do go and vote, or I go to the machine, but I always vote my conscience. And I do not give my consent to, corporations to dictate what I can do with my life or anything like that. But I do go and vote. I do go and actually type in or write in Star Trek captains, or fictional characters, or, who I believe, with my conscience, would serve good in whatever role. In my, service in this flesh suit, I think there's only been 2 actual people who I've ever voted for, right? Other than that, I'm writing in fictional characters. And to me, it's just hilarious because, again, refer back to that political chart, and where do you think that I'm at? Okay. And then do the logic. So, but it was, like I said, it's funny to me, because government's always going to be government. So, I don't really get caught up in the divide and conquer thing, and I don't do the lesser of 2 evil thing. That being the case, in this election with Fabian, Velazquez, and LaRhonda Patrick, I'm watching it, and again, with no emotional investment or endorsement or anything like that, I'm watching it for what it is, a Netflix show, right? And what I'm seeing in it is more of this stuff that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was talking about around here. Okay, now let me explain. It is very, very obvious what the system around here wants, which candidate they want in there. From, the play pretend government system and the elected officials to the local media around these parts, to debate organizers and, different event organizers. It's very obvious that the system really wants the people to choose the incumbent, LaRhonda Patrick. Now, I supported LaRhonda Patrick when she ran 3.5 years ago or whatever. I thought, hey, this is kind of cool, right? Wow. Young melanated woman coming in, right? She's going to shake it up because, let's face it, in this area, I call them the hillbilly Illuminati guys, but a very close knit family of interrelated and intermarried people whose beliefs go way back and all that good have had control over this area and this corporation for a very, very long time. And I was very excited. A young melanated woman going to come in and shake it up, right? And surely she is aware of the plight of her people. If that's the correct phraseology of, melanated people around here, surely she's aware that they've been heavily oppressed and over-policed and hoodwinked into systems that were for their detriment. And she would get in there and reverse this or slow it down or deconstruct it or something like that. I was very, very hopeful and excited, man. It was cool. It was like watching a superhero movie, right? And so she had my support. And in the beginning, and this is just my observations, this is my story to tell while I've been observing. In the beginning, you saw some stuff going on that was kind of cool. You saw some friction between her and the system, right? You would see squabbles of city councilmen at city hall meetings and things like that. And, you kind of almost always want your politicians, if you want politicians, going at each other. Because let me tell you something. When politicians are all on the same page and they're all of one mind and of one accord, it is not for your betterment. Not at all. So in the beginning, that's kind of, it was cool because you saw some friction going on and some pushback and everything like that. And then over time, this changed. Like if you turned away and then looked back, the song completely changed. And how it changed is, now all of a sudden, all of these city councilmen in this area who are supposed to be representing, allegedly, according to the video game, representing certain, posts and all that good stuff, which all have different interests and whatnot. And so there was some conflict. In 3 years, now they're one big happy family, one, big team. They're all moving in the same direction, like a duck to water. Now, for me, this is a little concerning, because, like I said, I'm aware that when you see politicians all getting along, somebody is getting screwed. And it's typically we the people in some way, shape, or form. And over time, that's kind of what happened, is I saw them assimilate into one thing. Now, this episode is not going to be about the flock thing. I may do another expose on the flock surveillance system, mass surveillance system, but I'm pretty sure that you guys who have been my longtime subscribers, you already know that the flock surveillance system and mass surveillance of this magnitude with AI and facial recognition and sound detectors and tracking and tracing and databasing you everywhere you go is one of the most abominable, horrific, abusive, unlawful things that you can institute in your community. If you want to know more about that, you can go to the Downloaded Content YouTube channel. I have a playlist called Orwell Was Right, Flock and Mass Surveillance. You can, go through the clips of previous podcasts I've done where I have ad nauseum explained the horror of instituting the flock system in any community. And again, I may put another video together or another episode together where I drill into it a little bit more, but it is horrific. It's like some stuff that George Orwell would piss his pants, man. And it's all done under the guise of safety and security and crime prevention. Okay. Well, for one, as our founding fathers said, if you sacrifice liberty for security, you will get neither, right? It's not a good idea. Not to mention, security is an illusion anyway. Nobody is secure. So you guys know that what this flock system does is, basically it's violating your Fourth Amendment rights, amongst other things. You have, it's searching and seizing every person that comes through its grid without a warrant, without due process of law, without probable cause. And now they shift it with wordplay. They shift it with, word games on that, and they'll use statutes, acts, and codes to, gaslight you into thinking that they're not invading your privacy by tracking everywhere you go and everyone that you meet. And now they're able to not hack, but they're able to tap into your social media and your ring lights and create this God in the digital realm, watching you and tracking you all over the place. And they'll tell you it's for your safety. Okay. Let me remind you that peace and safety is the war cry of every tyrant and dictator that has ever walked this planet or ever will. For you good fundamentalists, that that's what the Antichrist offers, right? Peace and safety. But it's not. It's the all-seeing eye of Ahriman, and it's hooked into a unempathetic AI system that can do all kinds of horrible things, and that's what it is. So like I said, if you want to know more about that, go to the Downloaded Content YouTube channel, look up the Orwell Was Right playlist, and keep your eyes on your inbox. I may be putting one more little thing about the flock system together. It's horrible, and we and the thing is around in local politics, they try to do it like it's the Truman Show. They try to keep everyone in this jurisdiction to focus on this area and this election, and everything that happens is right here, and that we're not a part of an interconnected world or nation that is operating under the dictates of a madman, as if the highest guy in the totem pole of the hierarchy isn't a lunatic that is willing to, I don't know, contract Palantir to create a database of every American and monitor them 24 hours a day to see if they have thought crimes about him or his policies or anything like that. It's almost like they don't want you to make that connection, that a local flock system and surveillance system like this is at the behest of the Antichrist or an Antichrist. And what would he do with it? Well, I mean, let's see. Right now, you can go and ask the Hispanic community what he is doing with the powers that have been bestowed upon him. Right? It's very, very scary, okay? But they try to sell it to you like, this is just for our area to prevent crime, and it's not always running, okay? It is always running, and it is not a system where, it's not operating unless there is a crime that happens, okay? It's always running, and, and they're acclimating the people around here to it little by little. Like first they'll roll it out. They rolled it out and said, it's just license plate readers, and we just turn it off and on. And then a little bit later, they'll go, and by the way, it can do this too. It can, do facial recognition, and it can hook into your social media. And, if you post anything that we deem to be criminal or, maybe criminal or could future possibly be criminal, then we know everywhere you're going. Right? Like, I don't know what moron hears that and goes, I feel safe, because you'd have to have a brain full of feces to feel safe knowing that you are being monitored by an AI system that Donald Trump can access, okay, or his departments, his people in his hierarchy. You got to be dumb. Like, you got to be fooling yourself to think that the worst possible thing that this system could be used for, it will be, right? And what that looks like around here is, we have a large Hispanic community, and, it's going to be used to round them up because according to the hierarchy, Hispanics are criminals, right? And again, it doesn't stop with them. It's going to keep going up and up and up to every demographic, that doesn't agree with the hierarchy and what's coming down the pike. That's what it is. I mean, you guys know what Palantir is. You know who Peter Thiel is. You know that Palantir is, basically the digital weaponized arm of, Mossad that is committing in the nation state of Israel, committing a genocide in Gaza right now through these systems. And now it's coming to your local municipalities, and they want you to just focus on the crime in your area, right? Okay. Anyway, but it's horrific. And I tried to express to the people around here in my jurisdiction how dangerous it was. I tried, civilly communicating with, council, with the city council here, and with the mayor here, and with the chief of police here, and, with anybody who would listen, that, hey, I get it. You guys have the best of intentions. You're great people. You're only going to use it to catch the bad guys. And, it's not an invasion of privacy, and it's not a violation of the Fourth Amendment because you have some statutes, codes, and acts and ordinances that says it's not. Okay. And by the way, what are codes for? To hide something, right? So codes are there to hide something. And guess what codes are there to hide? Your freedom. Uh, but anyway, so I get it. I get that it's, you can. We had one city council member down here. He's something, buddy. Um, he tries to gaslight the people around here into thinking, well, we saved a baby, right? We in 30 minutes we saved a baby, and it's like, okay, dude, cool. You saved a baby. I totally get it. However, at what cost, right? Because you're not going to hear all of the stories of the people who become victims of this system. You're not, and most people who are having their Fourth Amendments violated, they don't even know that it's happening, right? They don't even know enough to know that their privacy is being invaded and they're being searched and all this good stuff without a warrant. They don't know. So, this council member that we got down here, who's, like I said, he's a character. He justifies mass surveillance and antichrist technology by saying we saved a baby, and his logic is about as intelligent as saying, we mowed down an entire gymnasium of innocent people to catch one shoplifter, so it's a good system. We murdered all these people in this gym, and we got a criminal. It's just dumb. And anybody who thinks that line of reasoning is intellectual, well, refer back to Bonhoeffer, okay? It's not, because this is the reality of the situation with like the flock system and these mass surveillance systems. They are always going to be weaponized. And again, you're not going to hear the horror stories. I know some horror stories about, individuals who were in this area in Georgia. The AI system alerted the police that there was a 7-year warrant for this person, and by the end of the story, because they drove by a flock camera, a single mother was tased and carried to a jail, put in a cage for 3 days, traumatized because of an AI system that deemed her to be a criminal, and then law enforcement officers showed up with no empathy, no human whatever. They just were told by this AI system, hey, there's a warrant, we're here to take you to a cage, and then horror ensues. And so, so you'll be told that, like, you'll be gaslit into that this system is only criminals need to be afraid of this system. Okay? Well, who's defining criminal? Okay? Who's defining criminal? Now, I mean, if any particular system wants to label jaywalking a crime, then again, they move the tombstones with the wordplay. Yes, we used flock to catch this criminal. Okay? How long before people with an expired tag are labeled criminals? Or, certain bumper stickers or political statements on their automobiles are labeled criminals. Okay, so don't be fooled by that in your area. Whenever they try to shove this down your throat, who defines criminals? Well, ultimately, in a hierarchy, Donald Trump is going to define who a criminal is, and then everybody who is facilitating the horror going on in our country will follow orders and allow him and all of his Gestapo to access these systems. So you have, like, again, in my area, you have our local representatives that are selling this to the people, and they're not really giving them the full scope of what this thing is and what it can do. And maybe they don't even understand the full scope of what it is and what it can do. But they're going to learn. Believe me, they're going to learn. So that came up. And during this election, this was something that the system's candidate around here, LaRhonda Patrick, is really, really putting out there and touting as if it's a wonderful thing. Now, let me say, she's getting a lot of recognition for it, a lot of accolades, a lot of awards and all that good stuff, a lot of people praising her for it. And great. I mean, I guess that's great, but it wasn't her idea. It wasn't city council's idea. Okay. Smart cities and the smart city agenda goes back to the earliest I remember hearing about it was 1992. Everybody knows Project 2025, but go look up Agenda 21. Okay. It's a United Nations thing where this stuff has been planned for a very, very long time with smart city, sustainable development and all these fancy words for let's create a digital prison and a mass surveillance grid. So it's again, when you're outside of the theater and you're looking in at it and you're like, these people think that they came up with this flock camera stuff and they're patting each other on the back like they did, and they didn't. Go look up Agenda 21. This is something from up on high that has been trickled down, and you have active participants putting it up in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods, saying it's for your peace and for your safety, when that's not really what it's going to be used for. And we all know that. And where it can get even more dangerous is like in the instance of the fictional city of Warner Robins, is when a government starts to go broke, when its cash reserves are shot, as the fictional city of Warner Robins. It's busted, man. My fellow members of the Illuminati around here inform me that the city is well, let's just say that its expenses greatly outweigh its revenue. Okay, so that means there's a bankruptcy coming forth, maybe, but basically the fictional city is busted, man. It's broke. And the reason that is bone chilling is because when governments go broke, guess what they do? Governments go broke. They turn against the people every time. Human resources, right? To generate revenue, right? So they do desperate things, governments, these zombie corpses. They take all their tools and they turn it against their own people to generate revenue. And how you do that is you charge taxpayers property taxes and all these other taxes to put people in cages that typically have done no crime. Or there's no victim to any of their crimes. Okay, they're codified crimes, and so that's a real quick way for an entity to generate a lot of revenue. Is just fines after probation, after put them in a cage. It's pretty bad, right? And so that's what is going to happen around here. Hopefully, I get out of here before then, but that's what's going to happen. I mean, the fictional city of Warner Robins is broke. Now they've got this massive surveillance system that I think they're telling people that, oh, well, we didn't pay for it, or the people didn't pay for it. And I'm like, they're gonna, trust me, they're gonna pay for it in ways that they're not quite ready for if they don't wake up and do something about it. Nevertheless, that's the state of affairs with that system. And again, this episode isn't about the flock thing, but it's a horrific instrument of oppression that is being sold to these people. And I'm looking around and I do feel very much like Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Like, what is going on with the collective stupidity about this and the blinders that this system isn't going to be used by a maniac, because it is. I mean, it's not like it's conspiracy theory, guys. You have masked men abducting human beings on the streets of America. You have troops in major cities and more to come. You have political assassinations. This stuff isn't far wonky anymore. Trust me, the last thing you want to do is give that maniac any more tools. Okay? And again, like around here, they're trying to sell the people on, well, we're using this and we are good people. Cool. When Daddy Trump comes to take it away from you and utilize it, guess what you're going to do? Nada. So you have sold out the people that you say you represent. And it's a sad, sad state of affairs. It's very heartbreaking, which is why I don't put faith in politics, is because if you do, these people will, they will let you down in the very, very least. Mangle the intent of what they're there for to the point to where it's unrecognizable. And so that's what's going on here, And I'm watching this race, and I can tell that the system around here really wants LaRhonda Patrick to get it. And how I know that is, they have not been very polite to the newcomer, to Velazquez there. They've, again, that's for another podcast, but it's very obvious that the deck is very much stacked against this guy. And I do know that he has publicly stated, Velazquez, that if he is elected, he will reverse course on these flock cameras. So he's publicly stated that. And so the people around here do have a choice on whether or not they're going to go that way, or they're going to go with LaRhonda, the incumbent. And, so I guess we'll find out what happens there. Again, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't have a dog in the fight between either one of them. It is kind of cool that Fabian Velazquez has publicly said that he would come back on this tyrannical instrument of doom. But then again, I know how the system works, and I know how spiritual warfare works. Who's to say if he were to get elected that, like I've seen before, he gets in there and shakes things up in a little bit, and then not too long after swearing in, some very prominent people from up on high come into his office and look at a picture of his family on his desk and go, it's a very good looking family that you have there, Mr. Mayor. It'd be a pity if something happened to them, and then pass this ordinance, because that's how it works, right? In politics, is people go in with the best of intentions, and then before too long, they're either compromised or corrupted. It's at this point, it's foolish to think that good people can go into a demonic system and do anything other than get chewed up and spit out. I would like to believe that if he were to get elected, that he would, and he'd fight the system and fight the powers that be and all that good stuff. But history hath shown that typically they'll find your weak point, what your liabilities are, and they'll squeeze until you conform to their jive, and that's just how it works. I mean, that's biblical, it's scriptural, it's common sense. I mean, look at the macrocosm and the microcosm. That's just how it works. And again, like I have seen it, for example, like getting back to the councilman, Bibb, with the flock system. They tell you that they're good people. They have integrity. They're only going to use it against the bad guys. They're only going to use it in the instance of a crime. However, like with Charlie Bibb around here, this guy. Now, I haven't seen the video, but people have told me about it. At one city council meeting, he openly stated that people who are not citizens don't have the same rights that he does. Okay? And, we heard that same line of garbage when they were throwing people in Guantanamo Bay, saying the same thing, that, oh, well, we can torture them because they're not Americans, so they don't get the Bill of Rights. And it's like, that guy is, he's committing, I mean, in my opinion, he's committing treason. Our founding documents say the opposite, okay? It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. It doesn't say citizen. It doesn't say Baptist. It doesn't say any of that. It says all men. But you have a guy who has that belief in his head, and he has access to flock. Okay? Either through some of his cronies, and look, and I'm not anti-police. You people know that. I'm not a fuck the police kind of guy. I believe in individuals, but bad apples are everywhere. We know that. But like, we're talking about a city council guy who called police on a political opponent over political signs and almost had the guy thrown into a cage over a $1.25 political sign. And this is somebody who, through any kind of medium, has access to flock and defines who a criminal is when he doesn't even believe that all men have unalienable rights. Right? That's scary. That somebody who thinks that way has, through any channels, access to the flock system. So, imagine what people in power can do with political opponents if they have access, or anybody on their payroll has access to the flock system. It's terrifying and stupid, and that's what I'm talking about. Is the system just it pulls people in, and it corrupts them. Even if I did play politics and I did actually vote, I couldn't support LaRhonda because she's the incumbent, and where I'm from, the word incumbent means corrupted. And that's just because the minute that somebody is they're taken from we the people and put into a place of power, they're immediately detached from the reality of everyday life of real people. And that distance only grows as they stay in office, because they don't have the same worries and strifes to the degree that the little man on the street does anymore. They lose context of how it affects the everyday person. And the longer that they're in any kind of elected position, the more and more this gap grows, the more they are separated from the experience of the people they allegedly represent. And and that's why we're in the state of affairs that we're in this country, is because people keep going into the voting booth going, whoop, incumbent, they know what they're doing. No, they don't. Well, maybe they do, but they're getting further and further away from actually being able to represent you. And people just do it. They just do it. They do that, or they do the R and the D thing. And so, even outside of the flock system, anybody who's an incumbent, if I literally voted, I would never vote for an incumbent. And if I didn't have any other choice on a ballot, what I do is write in Captain James T. Kirk or Archer the Space Schnoodle, because I am not going to participate or facilitate the perpetuation of this horror that's happened in our country, that's brought us to our knees and to fascism. But you got a guy like Charlie Bibb who has access to it, and this is what is also concerning to me, and how I know that this whole thing, the political theater, is a spiritual thing. Because, in his example, like me watching it like the Netflix show that it is, because it's a Netflix show, and I don't think that the people who are in the Netflix show know that they're characters in a Netflix show. They actually, that's what makes the best characters. They really are engrossed in their character, and they don't really realize that they're in a theater, but the only difference is what they act out on their stage affects everybody around them, unfortunately. But like with the Charlie Bibb thing, and how systems assimilate and they congeal and chew good people who go into it up, is like with Charlie Bibb. Like when LaRhonda Patrick was first brought into office, there was a lot of hubbub in my jurisdiction about him, allegedly stealing water from the water department. There was a lot of people who were mad about that, a lot of people who wanted to see some kind of justice about that. And, guess what happened? To my knowledge, nothing. Nothing happened. And then later, when he was up for re-election, there was a guy who I actually interviewed, Ellis Carter, who was running for his post. who, again, if I bought into the theater and that government can actually do good, I believe that Ellis Carter actually would have went in there to represent the people and would have listened and would have, really thought about what he was, sacking and, voting on and all that good stuff. And when that election happened, it was a big funny story around here. Charlie Bibb allegedly broke their code, statutes, acts, and ordinances by going into a voting premise when he wasn't supposed to. It was on video, it was on camera, all that good stuff. The Houston County Democrat chairwoman caught him and made all these complaints and all this good stuff. And yeah, they're supposed to be in some department in Atlanta that's investigating it, and and all that good stuff. And it came down to between Charlie Bibb, this guy who believes that not everybody has the same unalienable rights by their creator, that, there's just a class of people who do. And then, but not everybody deserves habeas corpus and the right to a fair trial and all that good stuff. That guy, in the election, it came down to a matter of one vote. And he's sitting there today because of one vote, and he had violated their own rules, allegedly, by going into a polling place when he wasn't supposed to, campaigning and all this good stuff. And it's wild because I'm sitting here and I'm like, all right, let me check the game rules of, how it works around here. And in the fictional city of Warner Robins' city charter, there are punitive measures that could have been taken by these people's local representatives and council members and mayors and city clerks and city attorneys and all that to get that guy out of there. And nothing happened. Right? So that's, when that transpired, I was kind of like, okay, something's up, man. They're all like, no, this guy who is just, he's the worst. When he's just getting away with everything, kind of like another guy that we know about, and nobody has the backbone around him to stand up and say, this is wrong and we've got to do something, and we have the ability to do something. It's right here in our city charter, and they don't. Okay? They don't. And it brought me it brought me a lot of heartache, because if I were in any position where I had to work with that guy, if I heard somebody say that not everyone, and I'm paraphrasing, maybe like when I do my next episode, I might bring it up. I haven't watched it yet. I just read it in an article. If I heard somebody who is on my team or in my family say, nope, due process of law and habeas corpus is only for certain people, then I would have done something about it. I would have said something about it, because it's not right, it's not lawful, it's not moral, and it's not ethical to believe that or perpetuate that myth or try to spin that off like it's the truth. But I saw nothing. And the reason why is because government's not your friend. Play pretend government's not your friend. It's all going back to Dietrich Bonhoeffer's analysis of collective stupidity, right? Collective stupidity. We just go along to get along and play by these stupid codified rules that have gotten us to where we're at. And so that's kind of how it's playing out all over the country. I would imagine is little factions and little spin-offs of the big, corporate show that your vote actually matters. And like George Carlin said, I believe, if voting actually did anything, they would not let you do it. It's all a game. It's all one big club, and you're not in it. And if you don't realize that by now, then I would say I feel sorry for you, but I don't. So anyway, I mean, and the other thing is this: is look, and I know LaRhonda on a quasi personal level and everything. I think she's thinks that she's doing the right things, that her heart's in the right place, and all of that. Sure, maybe that's like what you're being told by the people that have surrounded her. That's another issue with people who stay in politics too long, is they're surrounded by yes people whose jobs and livelihoods depend upon saying yes and all that good stuff. But ultimately, when there's an environment of cohesiveness on ideas like Charlie Bibb's around here, that the Bill of Rights is only for a certain amount of people, or a certain elect amount of people. Well, I don't know, man. I think that it would probably be best to re-examine what you're there for. And so, I think that it's all one big theater that is being played on the world stage. I think that there's a lot of spiritual warfare behind it. I think that systems have entities that have long lifespans and long attention spans. Like it, and with the whole collective stupidity thing, it's like this. It's like with LaRhonda being in office, it's like historical, around here. First elected female melanated woman, and it's like, that's great, that's wonderful. Okay, absolutely wonderful that history was made, and this has never been done before, and I can appreciate it. And then you go, but like with the melanated community, I'm sure that they overwhelmingly support her because of this monumental feat. And I'm certainly not taking anything away from that monumental feat. However, why is it monumental? Well, it's monumental because of the stuff that we don't like to talk about around here, which is that the reason it's monumental is because around here in this jurisdiction of mine, systemic racism has been the prominent driving force for a very, 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 very long time. Nepotism has been entrenched for a very, very, very long time. People within systems of control who have been there and have passed it from one generation to the next, facilitating this people farming that we were talking about. That's why it was a monumental thing, right? That a young melanated woman came to power in that environment. And then in 3 years, she managed to turn it all around after hundreds of years, 248-ish, of that power structure operating with impunity. You'd have to be naive to believe that that's the case. I love a good superhero story just as much as anybody else. But no, it's highly, highly improbable. What's more probable is that, like I said, the system assimilated. And now their goals are the goals of the characters that they put in front of the people, right? Because what did Albert Pike say? When the people require a hero, one shall be provided for them. And, I have had, people in the melanated community around here call me and ask me what my take is on the race. And, I'm like, well, it's like this. If a system of surveillance is being implemented in the community that will undoubtedly devastate and put the melanated community under harder bondage, because it will, if that's going on, and people connect those dots, and then the salesperson that's in front of them selling them flock looks like they do, then they've been completely defused, right? And then in essence, if the melanated community throws their support behind someone who looks like they do, that is actively implementing a system that will detriment their communities further, then is this not the same sin that they were trying to rectify in the good old boy network that has long been established to be the power structure here? Right? They've brought it down to that two-party thing, that two identification thing of black and white. And if that's the case, then it's very, very sad. And the only thing that I would recommend for people who do intend to go vote in any capacity before they did is I'll leave you with this, and then float on down the river. I want to share a movie trailer with you guys, and I would suggest after we watch this movie trailer, I'll put the link to the full movie. It's free on YouTube and Tubi. I'll put the full movie in the description. So immediately after you watch this trailer and I sign off, if you want to be intellectually honest with your vote, if you're still playing that game, then I highly recommend that you watch this movie I'm going to recommend. So let's go ahead and pull the trailer up, and then I shall bid thee farewell.
You can control a man for a period with brute violence, but you cannot truly own a man unless he thinks your word is law and that he must obey, and is virtuous for doing so.
We are losing money. A little more every month that goes by with no end in sight. And they can sense weakness, and they are gonna smell blood like a gator to chum. They're gonna kill us both.
Mr. Scott said this man is a miracle worker. I think he can help us. You're a nigger.
Good people, good people. My name is Mr. Smith. As of this very moment, you are now all free. Free at last.
From now on, we are all in this together.
This plantation will run on equality. I have created something called Jones Plantation credits.
We're gonna keep them up to their ears in debt.
Jimmy Jack will now be in charge of our new security team to protect this plantation and to serve all of you. You two are gonna have a little contest to see who can win the hearts and minds of the human livestock out there.
Bo Jones!
Most people are weak-minded to wield real power. You must be willing to do what most consider unthinkable.
What most people consider to be unthinkable is that men like you even exist.
That's our greatest advantage. As free people, we work together for mutual benefits, letting our love and loyalty to Jones Plantation.
We are not free.
I ain't no slave.
They have tricked you into thinking that choosing your own master is the same as being free.
You offer them a truth that they don't want. They want to feel safe.
There's a dark thing going on in this plantation.
Every man deserves freedom, but freedom isn't free.
I'm Nathaniel Jones, and I approve this message. God bless you, and God bless this glorious...
Toodaloo. So that's the Jones Plantation, guys. Go ahead and click the link for the free full movie on YouTube down in the description box below. I'm going to tell you something. It's not a big Hollywood production, but I found it to be one of the best films I've ever seen, and you will learn way more about how things actually operate in watching the Jones Plantation than you ever thought that you could. So please give it a watch. If you are going to play the political game and go and vote, I highly suggest that you watch it first to make an intellectual and educated selection whenever you go to choose your corporate overlords, the Jones Plantation. It's brilliant. And tell your friends about it too. I think everybody actually needs to see it. I think that if everybody watched the Jones Plantation, especially around election time, the world might be a better place. But anyway, thank you guys for spending this Sunday sermon with me. I know it was a long one, and that's okay, man. I know I might have said some uncomfortable things, but that's okay too, because we need that in our lives. A good kick in the pants every now and then. That's what makes us better. Guys, please go to downloadedcontent.com, subscribe to the newsletter so you can get all the behind the scenes and exclusive news things and snippets I send out. I am busy writing my next novel, Apocalypse 2, which a lot of this stuff with local politics, I'm actually doing research for my novel, which is fantastic because it's an endless inkwell, trust me. But yeah, go to downloadedcontent.com, subscribe to the newsletter. We are up to 357 subscribers on YouTube. If you're not one of them, please become one right now. Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification. Also, we would like a little bit of help getting the Spotify channel boosted up, so go to Spotify and subscribe. If you happen to want a free pocket constitution, whenever you subscribe to the newsletter, the Downloaded Content newsletter, and you get your welcome email, hit reply and say, hey, I'd like a free pocket constitution, and we'll make sure that happens for you. So guys, until next time, keep your chin up. I know it's kind of heavy for those of us with eyes to see and ears to hear, with all of the collective stupidity and perpetuation of fascism all around us, with people who hold their hand up and swear an oath to that Constitution and have no idea what it actually means or what it says. I know it's heartbreaking. I know. Don't put your faith in politicians. People who purport to be in places of power will always fail you and let you down. Until next time, I'm going to sign off. Wish you guys well. And let's all hope that 3i Atlas is a mothership coming to take us home, is all I can really say at this point. Archer, anything? He's ready for bed and snuggles. All right, guys. Love you. Next time.
You've reached the end of downloaded content, which means either you're more advanced than most or have nowhere better to be. Either way, subscribe to the newsletter and on YouTube, TikTok, or wherever souls are bartered online. Catch the long-form podcast on Spotify with new episodes weekly. Be sure to pick up Then Came the Flood, a novel by Daniel Louis Crumpton on Amazon.com, booksamillion.com, or wherever books are sold. Experience a weaving together of the antediluvian world in a way that you've never felt before. Then Came the Flood by Daniel Louis Crumpton. We'll see you in the next download.